San Diego State University's 7th president, Dr. Stephen L. Weber.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you to San Diego State University for the second lecture in the San Diego celebration of the 2009 Kyoto Prize. Made possible through the generosity of the Inamori Foundation. Dr. Inamori, it is an honor to have you visiting us again at San Diego, particularly on Earth Day, given Kyocera's pioneering work in sustainable energy. The Kyoto Prize Symposium is a two-day celebration of the lives and works of extraordinary innovators, scholars, and artists who are recipients of the Kyoto Prize, Japan's highest private award for lifetime achievement. The Kyoto Prize is presented annually by the Inamori Foundation to individuals and groups worldwide in three categories: advanced technology, basic sciences, arts, and philosophy. In conducting this symposium jointly with the University of San Diego, the University of California, San Diego, and jointly with those two, San Diego State hopes to provide an opportunity for an international audience to learn about the achievements of these remarkable Kyoto laureates. They are truly global treasures. We are grateful to Dr. Inamori and the Inamori Foundation for sharing them with us and providing this occasion to contemplate the connection between these laureates' extraordinary accomplishments and our common human quest for peace and harmony. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to help you understand the nature and the significance of the Kyoto Prize, we will show a short video.
The Inamori Foundation is proud to present the Kyoto Prizes each November 10th in Kyoto, Japan. The Kyoto Prizes are presented to individuals and groups worldwide whose work has shown a significant contribution to the betterment of society and mankind. Kyoto Prizes recognize three categories of human achievement: advanced technology, basic sciences, and arts and philosophy. The Kyoto Prizes consist of academic honors, a 20-karat gold Kyoto Prize medal, and a cash gift totaling 50 million yen per category. Dr. Kazuo Inamori's belief that mankind's future depends on the balance of science, technology, and the human spirit is reflected in the Kyoto Prizes, which promote this balanced development of science and humanity. They're designed to recognize outstanding achievers globally and inspire people to even greater achievements. The Kyoto Prize ceremonies have long been attended by members of Japan's imperial family. The audience includes international dignitaries and elite representatives of academia, science, technology, the arts, business, and government. Each year, global heads of state offer their thanks and congratulations to the Kyoto Prize laureates for their important contributions to society. These leaders' recognition and support underscore the importance of balancing technology and humanity, especially as we face the challenges of the new millennium. Kyoto Prize laureates are selected from specific fields within the three categories. The Inamori Foundation's rigorous nomination process ensures unbiased consideration of the nominees, and the laureates are then selected with the approval of the Foundation's Board of Directors. The Inamori Foundation was created in 1984 with a personal endowment of 20 billion yen from Dr. Kazuo Inamori. Dr. Inamori is the founder of Kyocera Corporation, a multi-billion-dollar global enterprise that he established with the equivalent of just $10,000 in 1959. Dr. Inamori created the foundation in reflection of his philosophy. He has long said that human beings have no higher calling than to strive for the greater good of humankind and all the world. Since 1985, the foundation has awarded the Kyoto Prizes to recognize outstanding contributions to scientific progress, cultural advancement, and human achievement. The Kyoto Prize laureates are people completely devoted to their work. They hold a deep reverence for the human spirit. They've dedicated their lives, often with little recognition or encouragement, to creative work that benefits all humankind. Their continued devotion to learning, to excellence, and their outstanding accomplishments for the common good establish them as truly deserving of these awards. To build a future based on a balance between science, technology, and the human spirit. To encourage balanced development of mankind's cognitive and spiritual sides. To help ensure peace and prosperity. We honor our laureates for their extraordinary efforts and outstanding contributions to humanity. This is the mission of the Kyoto Prize.
Now, please welcome San Diego State University's Vice President for Research and Graduate Dean, Dr. Thomas R. Scott.
As we begin this morning, I would like to take an opportunity to recognize some of the distinguished guests with whom we're honored to share this occasion today. First, Dr. Isamu Akasaki, today's laureate in advanced technology. Akasaki, could you please stand? Akasaki-sensei, thank you. The Kyoto laureates in basic science, Drs. Peter and Rosemary Grant from Princeton University. We would also be sharing the occasion with the third Kyoto laureate, Mr. Pierre Boulez, the laureate in arts and philosophy, but for a poorly behaving volcano in Iceland that has left him stranded at Charles de Gaulle Airport. And then members of the Inamori Foundation, led, of course, by Dr. Kazuo Inamori, the founder of Kyocera Corporation. Dr. Inamori, please. I'm sorry. And Ms. Asako Inamori, Dr. Inamori's wife. Several leading directors of the Inamori Foundation, which awards the Kyoto Prize, Mr. Hiru Imura, Dr. Tasaku Hanjo, Mr. Toyomi Inamori, Mr. Kazu Momora, and Mr. Kiyohiko Kagoshi. The Honorary Council General in Japan, in San Diego, Dr. Mike Inoue. Mike? And leading our symposium from the San Diego community, Mr. Robert Horstman, the Regional Chairman of U.S. Bank. Robert? Mr. Malin Burnham of the Burnham Companies, and Mr. Rodney Lanthorn, President and Chairman of the Board of Kyocera Wireless. And from San Diego State University, the other vice presidents, Nancy Marlin, who is Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Ms. Sally Roush, who is Vice President for Business and Financial Affairs, Ms. Mary Ruth Carlton, Vice President for University Relations and Development, and Dr. Jim Kitchen, Vice President for Student Affairs. And then finally, as a group at least, I would like to recognize the 10 extraordinary graduate students who are the recipients of Inamori Fellowships this year. Could the Inamori Fellows please stand? Thank you. We have prepared a brief video tribute to Dr. Akasaki, which we will now show.
Dr. Isamu Akasaki was born in 1929 in Chiran, Kagoshima, the third of 6 children. His father, a descendant of the legendary Shimazu clan, made Buddhist altar adornments for a living. He had a samurai's reticence and held diverse interests, including a love of the latest novelties. His mother was a devout Buddhist, always smiling and helping others. She warmly watched over young Isamu, advising him to do whatever he wished, as long as he caused no trouble for others. During his childhood, he enjoyed visiting the mountains and seaside, catching insects and fish with great interest. He was also attracted to mineral specimens. Growing up in the midst of war, he imagined life as a Navy pilot. In 1952, he graduated from Kyoto University with a degree in science. He joined Kobe Kogyo Corporation, where he worked on television picture tubes and learned about non-exothermic luminescence. In 1959, he became a research associate in the Department of Engineering at Nagoya University and began studying semiconductors with an interest in light-emitting devices. He joined Matsushita Electric Industrial Company in 1964, where he realized that no one had invented the blue LED based on semiconductor PN junctions. He decided to invent it himself. LEDs are known for their extremely low power consumption and long life properties, while LEDs producing red, orange, green, and other colors of light were common. The blue LED remained out of reach. If the blue LED could be developed, then LED technology would be able to produce all 3 primary colors, allowing LEDs to create any color of light, including white. But the obstacles to creating the blue LED were daunting. After most scientists worldwide had already withdrawn from this research, Dr. Akasaki devoted his life to it. In 1989, he succeeded in creating a gallium nitride-based PN junction, once considered impossible, and proved the potential to commercialize the blue LED. His achievement was a strong step toward commercialization and was recognized worldwide. Today, the blue LED has wide-ranging applications, including in electronic displays everywhere from mobile devices to outdoor stadiums. The blue semiconductor laser has given rise to high-definition Blu-ray video, providing an unprecedented home theater experience. And white LED lighting is now appearing in homes and offices, helping to preserve our fragile environment through the more efficient use of electrical power worldwide. Dr. Akasaki continues his university research. He states that creative work requires curiosity and an indomitable mind. His advice to young people who aspire to become scientists is, hold on to your dream. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Experience is the best teacher. His family includes Ryoko, his wife, who enjoys music, painting, embroidery, and mountain climbing. Their daughters, Reiko and Junko, work for major electronics companies in Japan with their husbands. The 25th Kyoto Prize laureate in advanced technology, Dr. Isamu Akasaki.
For about 80% of the history of life on this planet, organisms learned about their surroundings primarily using two types of senses. One was to detect the chemicals in the fluids that bathed them, what today we call smell and taste, depending on whether those molecules are in the air or dissolved in fluids. And the second means was by detecting vibrations. If the vibrations were slow, today we call it touch. If they're fast, today we call it hearing. But in both cases, it's a detection of vibration. When the cyanobacteria had finally respired enough oxygen into the atmosphere to support complex life about 542 million years ago, there was an enormous proliferation of complicated creatures experimenting in different ways with evolutionary traits. Most of those experiments, of course, were doomed to failure, as always happens in evolution. But one idea that was had by a humble creature called the horseshoe crab, Limulus polyphemus is his Latin name, not a crab at all, an arachnid in fact, was to build a molecule that would detect photons, detect electromagnetic radiation. The molecule was called rhodopsin, and when it captures a photon, it twists around one of its carbon bonds. Twisting, it releases an electrical potential, which is carried to the brain, and the brain is alerted that a photon has been captured. The first decision to be made, and a fateful one, and if it hadn't been made as it was, we wouldn't be here today celebrating Dr. Akasaki's achievement, was where in the vast electromagnetic spectrum that we receive from the sun and elsewhere to set the sensitivity of this molecule. You've got to choose a point. Well, the electromagnetic spectrum starts with AC circuits at one end, low power, very long wavelengths. A single wavelength would stretch across the United States. Moves through radio frequencies, microwave, radar, infrared, ultraviolet, shorter and shorter wavelengths, greater and greater energy, into soft X-rays, hard X-rays, and gamma rays. By the time you get to the other end of the spectrum, you have particles that are so powerful and have such short wavelengths that they are presently passing through our bodies and the rest of the Earth, and neither of us knows about the other because we occupy such disparate parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Where do you set your sensitivity in that vast array? You can't set it at the very low end because the wavelengths are too long to provide you any precise information. So you keep moving up to higher and higher levels. Infrared starts to work. The wavelengths are short enough that you can get information. Some animals use infrared. Snakes on a cold desert evening have a pit organ with which they can detect the infrared radiation coming from the warm bodies of mammals and detect their prey that way. But if we had infrared as our sensitivity level, we would see one another not by our physical outlines, but by the vapor of heat that surrounded us, a constant wavy image of the heat processes that we were giving off. So move a little bit higher into what we now call the slice of visible spectrum, and that part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we have come to call light. Why not go even higher? Because if you exceed that and get into the X-ray range, this soft tissue, this protein that has evolved, can't stop the particle. The particle moves right through it, which is why an X-ray shows your bones, which can stop it, but not your soft tissue. So there's nothing to be detected at that point. The sensitivity was set at the highest level that a soft tissue like a protein could detect. So how valuable was this new sensory system that was evolved? It depended on how you lived. To most animals, not very valuable, because vision has one great advantage, and that is that light travels in straight lines. So if you build a sheet of tissue, retina, and fill it full of receptors, we have 126 million in each eye, and you can tell which receptor is struck by the photon coming in, you can draw a line straight back out of your eye to the outside world and know exactly where that photon originated. So you can precisely localize something. That's the great advantage of vision. But there are two disadvantages. The first is light travels in straight lines, which means unless you have a straight line of vision to the object you're trying to detect, you can't detect it. That is to say, things can hide from you. They can't hide their smells, they can't hide their sounds, they can hide their vision from you. So unless you have a high perspective and a long line, vision is a relatively invaluable, not valuable commodity to have. The second disadvantage, of course, is that it requires an external source of energy, the sun until recently, and that's not up all the time. So the two requirements for vision to be valuable to an animal is they need to be diurnal and they need to be high. They need to live high. The two animals, smell, by the way, continues to dominate the animal kingdom. But for two types of animals, vision became dominant, and those two types were birds and primates, flying or living in trees. It became so important to primates through the last 40 million years of primate evolution that vision now occupies about the back 40% of our brain. More of our brain is given over to that and perhaps to the control of movement than to any other subject that our brain deals with. So we have an animal that is dependent on vision, has become dependent on vision. We evolved from those animals. Even though we descended from the trees, we stood up on our hind legs, we still have the high vantage point, and vision continues to be our dominant sense. We gather about 70% of the information about our world through our eyes. It was so important, in fact, that we developed 3 other proteins called iodopsins that were most sensitive in the long wavelength, low energy part of this slice, which we call red, the middle energy, middle wavelength part that we call green, and the high energy, short wavelength part that we call blue. And by comparing the amount of input that is received by the red, green, and blue receptors, our brain can compute the wavelength of the incoming light and can create in our brains a new perception that we call color. There is no color in the world around you. There are only different wavelengths. Color is a confabulation of your brain that is calculated in 2 points about an inch from the tips of my fingers. So we now have a system that is fully arrayed and upon which we have become very heavily dependent. It was so important to us that we couldn't rely on just having the sun up half the time. We needed light all of the time. And so we conspired to develop different ways to have artificial lights. We started with fire. That worked from Prometheus to Edison, 1 million years or so. And then Edison came along with the electric light, which is not so different from a fire. You're just forcing so much electricity through a wire that the wire heats up and gives off mainly heat, but some of it rises to the level where it reaches the visible spectrum. Terribly inefficient. We settled for that for about a century. Then fluorescent lights, which excite individual atoms within a glass tube. And finally, I shouldn't say finally, presently at least, light-emitting diodes. An LED works by having, it is a diode because it has 2 crystals to it. And one crystal has an excess of electrons, the other has a paucity of electrons, and there's a junction between them, the p-n junction. Passing a small electrical current into the side that has an excess of electrons causes some electrons to be given off. They move across the junction and they fall into the waiting holes of the electron pore crystal. As they fall, they lose energy and they give that energy off as a particle. LEDs use 1/10 the energy of incandescent bulbs. They last 50 times as long. They're much more rugged than incandescent bulbs because incandescent bulbs, of course, are blown glass. So we all have LEDs in our cell phones, and I have one in my pocket, and a couple in my pocket, in fact, and you couldn't walk around with blown glass. It's a much better way of producing light. So it sounded perfect, but there was one enormous flaw, and that is the particle that is given off, the intensity and the frequency of that particle is determined by the form of the crystals that make up the diode. And the crystals that were first developed put out energy in the infrared range. Now that's not useless. It's presently found in your TV remotes. It puts out an LED with infrared signals to it. It's used in motion detectors, but it's not light. And so the effort was on in the 1960s and 70s to move the energy levels up out of the infrared and into the visual spectrum. The achievements that brought us red LEDs and subsequently green LEDs were made in the late 60s and around 1970. But until you completed that tricolor group with the blue, LEDs became relegated to sort of sideshows, indicator lights, small indicator lights, because you couldn't make a full video display unless you had all three colors to work with. The brain needs input from all three types of receptors to compute its sense of color. You also can't make white light, which is a combination of all three, red, green, and blue. And so LEDs never achieved or were unable to achieve the status that everybody expected them to be able to. By 1973, the need for a blue LED was so intense that solid-state physicists were working on it frantically and eventually gave up. Nobody could build the crystals that were necessary to generate a frequency short enough to reach the blue end of the spectrum. Dr. Akasaki, however, did not. And from 1973 until 1989, he worked to continually purify gallium nitride, which was known to have the capacity to generate particles in the blue spectrum, and yet the crystals themselves were devilishly hard to build. He stayed with that. He continued to purify the crystals. He made discoveries along the way that you'll hear about this morning. He learned that by doping the crystals with magnesium, he could get a brighter light coming out of it. And in 1989, at an international physics meeting, Dr. Akasaki, at the end of his talk, turned on the world's first blue LED, and the audience stood and cheered, something you don't imagine happens very often at physics meetings. There is one other outcome to that, and that is an immediate byproduct is the development of the blue laser diode. The advantage there is that with the shorter wavelength, it changes the amount of information you can store on a disk. You may know a CD and a DVD works by having a rapidly spinning disk with a lot of dots on it. Poised right over that disk is a laser pointed at those dots. Some dots are filled, and when they are, the laser light is reflected to a detector. Some are empty, and the light is absorbed. And that is read as ones and zeros in a binary code that is the digital code for the information stored on the disk. The size of the holes that are either filled or empty has to match the wavelength of the light that is shining into it. And if you use red light, which is what has been used until recently, you have to have, since the wavelength is long, you have to have a relatively large hole. You can only fit certain number of such holes onto a 12-centimeter disk, and so you have the standard 700 megabyte CD or DVD. But with the development of the blue laser, now the wavelength is much shorter, the holes can be made smaller, you can put more of them on the disk, and information becomes much more compacted. So Blu-ray technology was an immediate outgrowth of Dr. Akasaki's discoveries. So we owe much that we value in modern technology to Dr. Akasaki and the development of the blue LED. We were just driving in this morning, passing the freeway sign, which had his name and lecture on it in blue LED lights. It seemed very fitting. They are stadium displays. They're on corporate displays. They backlight your cell phone, your computer screen. The white light there, of course, is dependent on the development of the blue LED. We use 20 times a day and every day the product of Dr. Akasaki's research and development, and I'm honored to introduce him to you this morning, Dr. Isamu Akasaki. Okay. And I will stand over here.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. 半導体研究者の一人として25周年という節目の年に非常に栄誉ある京都賞をいただき大変光栄に思っております。はじめに少年時代から大学時代までを振り返り、次に青色発光素子に魅せられていった経緯と窒化ガリウム PN 接合青色 LED を実現した私の旅路をお話しいたします。
It is a great honor for me to receive the Kyoto Prize for my work as a semiconductor scientist in this 25th anniversary year of the prize. Today, I will share with you my journey leading to this day. I will start with a look back on my childhood through university, then explain how I was drawn to blue light-emitting devices. Finally, I will describe how I created a gallium nitride PN junction, blue LED, as a result of my work with fellow researchers.
私は風光明媚で自然が豊かな鹿児島市で育ちました。史跡も多く、歴史的行事の盛んなところでした。少年時代は近くの野山や海辺で、遊ぶのが大好きで、日没まで虫取りや磯遊びに夢中になっていました。また鉱物標本の結晶を見るのが大好きで、今でも自然石を見るのが好きです。後年になって私が結晶にのめり込むのはこれに関係しているのでしょうか。
I grew up in the city of Kagoshima. It was a scenic place with much natural beauty. Historical sites were preserved and historical events celebrated. As a boy, I loved playing in nearby fields and beaches. I would catch bugs and play on the rocky shores until sunset. I was also interested in crystals and mineral specimens, and I still love looking at fieldstones. This may have led to my delving into crystals as an adult.
薩摩氏族の末裔である寡黙な父は、私たち子どもの行動や進路については細かいことは一切言わず、母任せでした。母は敬虔な仏教徒で、いつも微笑を絶やさず、他人に迷惑をかけない限り、自分の好きに住めばよいと、いつも温かく見守ってくれました。
My father was a descendant of Satsuma warriors, a taciturn man who did not fuss over details of what his children did or what life course they would take. He left such matters to my mother, a pious Buddhist who always smiled and watched over us. She encouraged us to pursue whatever course we liked as long as it was not a nuisance to others.
中学は兄と同じ、県立中学に進みまして、兄と同じように慶典会に入会しました。慶典といいますのは、西郷隆盛の遺訓であります慶典愛人に由来します。これは薩摩藩に伝わる互いに切磋琢磨する、地域教育の一環です。毎日曜日の早朝、西郷墓地の境内を清掃し、国旗を掲揚して桜島と対面し、すがすがしい気持ちで一日を過ごすのが常でした。また、心身の鍛錬と親睦を兼ねて、よく海浜や山によくキャンプに行きました。
I attended Kagoshima Junior High School, which my brother had also attended. He was in the Kaiten-kai Association, and I followed suit. The name Kaiten came from Saigo Takamori's dying instruction of Kaiten Aijin, or revere heaven, love people. It was part of a community educational system begun in the Satsuma domain, where boys worked together and learned from each other. Each Sunday morning at Kaiten-kai, we cleaned the grounds of the cemetery of Saigo Takamori and his comrades at the Nanshu Shrine, raising the national flag on a mosu bamboo pole and admiring the view of Mount Sakurajima. We spent the rest of the day feeling serene. Often we would camp in the mountains or on the beach for mental and physical training and to promote friendship.
当時は第二次世界大戦の真っ最中で軍国教育を受けましたが、中学の2年までは自宅通学できましたので、慶典会の活動にも参加できました。しかし、3年になりますと、戦況が悪化し、学徒動員が始まりまして、1944年の5月からは、鹿屋の海軍航空部隊で飛行機の掩体壕作りや、翌年からは佐世保の海軍工廠でプライス番工として働き、終戦までほとんど授業を受けていません。1945年の9月、4年生に復学しましたが、その間、鹿児島市は大空襲を受けてほとんど消失し、両親は山奥の伝統のない一軒家に疎開していましたので、通学には往復3時間半かかり、時間はほとんど限られていましたけれども、薄暗い魚油ランプの下で、薄暗い明かりの下で、借りてきた古本を貪るように読んだ記憶があります。当時はひどい食糧難で、また教材などの物資難で大変な時でしたが、私たち子どもの高学心に対する両親の寛大さをありがたく思っております。
Those years fell in the midst of World War II, and thus I received a military education. I went to school from home until 8th grade and still took part in Kaichenkai activities. By my 9th grade, the war was worsening and mobilization of junior high school students began. In May of 1944, I left my parents to join other students in making aircraft bunkers for the Navy's Air Fleet base in Kanoya. The next year, I operated a milling machine in the Navy shipyard in Sasebo and hardly attended any classes until the war ended. Then I returned to the 10th grade. Kagoshima, however, had been destroyed during an air raid, and my parents were evacuated to a home deep in the mountains with no electricity. It was 10 kilometers from the city and took 3.5 hours to walk to school and back. That left me no time to study. Yet I recall reading old borrowed books by the dim light of what I think was a fish oil lamp. Those were tough times with shortages of food and supplies, including textbooks, and I'm grateful to my parents for indulging their children's eagerness to learn.
1946年3月、旧制七高を受験、幸い合格いたしましたが、七高も全焼しており、海軍航空隊跡の敷地で再開したのは翌年の11月末でした。旧兵舎を利用した教室の窓ガラスはあちらこちら破れたままで、寒風を避けるためマントをかぶって授業を受けたこともありました。それができない先生方は大変でした。お互い栄養状態が悪いので寒さが一層こたえました。
In March 1946, I took the entrance exam for high school and was accepted. However, the school had been burned down, and it was not until November that it was reopened at the former base of the Navy's Air Fleet. We used barracks with broken windows for makeshift buildings and went to classes wrapped in cloaks to protect ourselves against the cold wind. Teachers who were not able to do so must have had a hard time. All were poorly nourished and so suffered even more from the cold.
翌年初夏からは鶴丸城市に校舎再建のための活動が始まり、本来3年間の七高での授業も2年余りでした。このようなわけで基礎、ベーシックを学ぶ時間が非常に少なかったのは否めませんが、幸い漁師益友に恵まれ、また物質的には不自由ながらも七高では自治療生活を楽しみました。
The following summer, we started to raise funds to construct school buildings at the ruins of the Tsurumaro Castle. I spent just over 2 years in high school rather than the normal 3, and so did not have enough time to learn the basics. However, I was fortunate to have good teachers and friends and enjoyed my life in a student-governed dormitory despite the lack of material comforts.
大学は京都に行こうと早くから決めていましたが、物理か科学か決めかねていました。先輩の強い勧めもあって科学に進みました。兄弟時代は講義や実験の合間を縫ってよく奈良や京都の神社別格巡りや、夏休みには帰省しないときは信州の山登りをしていました。
I had long planned to attend Kyoto University, but had not decided on my major, physics or chemistry. Upon recommendation of a senior student, I chose chemistry. During my college years, I visited temples and shrines in Kyoto and Nara between lectures and labs. During the summer, I climbed mountains in the Shinshu area. So those 3 years in Kyoto felt very short.
私が熱を伴わない発光であるルミネッセンスに出会ったのは1954年に神戸工業現富士通ですが、そこでテレビジョンのブラウン管の蛍光面を担当した時です。現在テレビの画像はほとんど液晶やプラズマ方式に変わっていますが、テレビ放送開始から半世紀の間活躍したのがブラウン管です。ブラウン管はフェイスプレートの内面に粉末蛍光体が塗布されてて、それに電子線の冷気されて発光する仕組みです。その時初めてルミネッセンスと現象に出会い、私は大変興味を持ちました。蛍光面はピンホールができないようにするために電子の侵入張に比べて厚く作りますので、光はその粉末の蛍光体層に吸収されて露出します。そこでもっと明るい画像を実現しようと、当時その発光する粉末ではないなんか透明な薄い結晶を積み重ねる、今日で言いますと光る半導体のエピタキシャル結晶成長ということになりますが、ということはできないだろうかと。もちろん当時は全くの夢物語なんですが、そういったことを考えたこともありました。当時はまたトランジスタの創造期で、神戸の本社では ゲルマニウムの単結晶やトランジスタの研究を行っていました。ゲルマニウム自体は光りませんが、粉末ではないこの単結晶というのは私にとって非常に魅力的に見えました。
My first experience with luminescent, or light emission without the generation of heat, was in 1954. I was working on fluorescent screens of bronze tubes for televisions at the Kobe Kogyo Corporation, which is now Fujitsu. Although liquid crystal and plasma displays have largely replaced them, bronze tubes were the main screens for the first half century of television. A powder phosphor is applied to the inner surface of the tube, and the fluorescent screen emitted light when excited by an electron beam accelerated to 10 kilovolts. I had been working on luminescence ever since this first experience, which left me intrigued. The screens were made thick relative to the depth of the electron penetration so as not to develop pinholes. Thus, a considerable amount of light was absorbed by the phosphor powder, resulting in lower brightness. This made me wonder if it would be possible to make images brighter by layering thin, light-emitting transparent crystals rather than powders. We now call these epitaxial light-emitting crystals, but then it was nothing but a pipe dream. It was then the transistors first appeared, and germanium single crystals and transistors were being investigated at our Kobe headquarters. Being a semiconductor, germanium does not emit light. Still, single crystals rather than powders appealed to me.
1959年、創設間もない名古屋大学工学部に移り、ゲルマニウムの高純度単結晶の作成と半導体物性の研究を開始しました。これは机一つないところからの出発でしたが、これが私の結晶や半導体研究への転機でした。1960年、基礎エピタキシャル成長をはじめ、翌年、ゲルマニウムの単結晶膜の成長に成功しました。そして翌年から本格的にこの研究に取り組みましたが、この仕事が縁で、新設の松下電器東京研究所に招かれることになりました。
In 1959, I moved to the new Department of Electronics at Nagoya University and started working on growing pure single crystals of germanium and studying the physical properties of semiconductors. At first, I worked by myself without even a table, but this marked a turning point in my research into crystals and semiconductors. I began work on vapor phase epitaxial growth in 1960. I grew germanium single crystal films the following year, then launched fully into epitaxial growth of germanium. This work led to a position at the newly established Mitsushita Research Institute in Tokyo.
そこで光る半導体単結晶の研究を開始しました。当時、リン化ガリウムやヒ素リン化ガリウムなどを用いた赤色や黄緑色の LED や赤外のレーザーダイオードは開発されていましたが、可視光の中で最もエネルギーの大きい、つまり波長が短い青色の光の素子は実用化の見通しは全く立たない状況でありました。
There, I started working on light-emitting semiconductor single crystals. Red and yellow-green LEDs based on gallium phosphide or gallium arsenide phosphide had already been developed, as had infrared LDs, laser diodes. The prospect of developing commercial applications for devices emitting blue light with the greatest energy and shortest wavelength in the visible spectrum had yet to emerge. May we have a slide, please? Thank you.
LED からの発光のエネルギーは、用いる半導体のエネルギーギャップに等しく、また青色の光の波長は455から485ナノメートルですから、青色 LED を実現するには2つの条件が必要です。第一にエネルギーギャップが2.6 エレクトロンボルト、電子ボルト以上、波長換算で455ナノメートル以下の半導体の使用が必須であります。次に、発光効率の高い直接繊維型と呼ばれる半導体を用いるのが断然有利です。しかし、これらは十分条件ではありません。この2つの条件を満たす半導体の第一に高品質の単結晶を作成することと、その PN 接合の実現が不可欠です。しかし、エネルギーギャップの大きい半導体でこれを実現するのは極めて困難です。単結晶、高品質の単結晶を必要とするのは、高効率の発光を得るためです。また、PN 接合の実現にも不可欠であります。
The energy of photons emitted by LEDs is equal to the energy gap in the semiconductor. The wavelength of blue light is from 455 to 485 nanometers. Therefore, there are two requirements for creating blue LEDs. First, it is essential to use semiconductors with an energy gap of more than 2.6 electron volts, equivalent to the wavelength of 485 nanometers. Semiconductors that have such large energy gaps are called wide bandgap semiconductors. Secondly, it's advantageous to use direct transition semiconductors because they are brighter. But these requirements are not sufficient. It is essential to grow high-quality single crystals and to create PN junctions, positive-negative junctions, for semiconductors that meet both requirements. However, it is difficult to achieve both aims in wide bandgap semiconductors. High-quality crystals are necessary to reduce the impurities and lattice defects that interfere with light emission. It is also essential to control the electrical conductivity of semiconductors to form PN junctions, and those descriptions are here, the requirements for building a crystal that will emit sufficient light.
半導体には電子の抜けた正孔ポジティブホールの数が電子の数よりも多い、つまり電気的にはプラスの P 型半導体と呼ばれる半導体と、電子数が正孔数よりも多い、つまり電気的にはマイナスの N 型と呼ばれる半導体があります。この P 型半導体と N 型半導体を原子的に、電子ではなくて原子的に同士を接合したものを PN 接合と呼ばれ、トランジスタとか LED の基本構造です。
Some semiconductors have more holes or lack of electrons than they have electrons. They are electrically positive and are called the P-type semiconductors. Others have more electrons than holes, so are electrically negative or N-type semiconductors. A combined structure is called a PN junction, a single seamless crystal. The PN junction is the basic structure of semiconductors, including transistors and LEDs.
1970年代、青色 LED 材料の有力候補は炭化ケイ素、セレン化亜鉛および窒化ガリウムでした。炭化ケイ素は PN 接合が作られていましたが、間接繊維型のために高効率の LED には不向きです。セレン化亜鉛と窒化ガリウムはいずれも直接繊維型半導体ですが、大型結晶の作成が極めて困難で、また P 型結晶は実現されていませんでした。セレン化亜鉛は電子冷気などで明るく発光し、多くの研究者が青色レーザーを求めて研究しておりました。窒化ガリウムは融点も窒素蒸気圧も非常に高くて、大変結晶を作るのが難しくて、大型結晶の作成は困難であります。また、このような時に、こういうわけで単結晶作成というのは、異種基板、ディスシミラーサブストレートの上に違った基板の上に作らざるを得ません。
In the 1970s, promising candidates for blue LEDs included silicon carbide, zinc selenide, and gallium nitride. Silicon carbide was the only wide bandgap semiconductor that could be used to create a PN junction, so we tried to develop blue LEDs with it. But it is an indirect transition semiconductor and so emits light poorly. Zinc selenide and gallium nitride are both direct transition semiconductors, but it's difficult to grow large crystals, and no P-type crystals had been created. Zinc selenide emits a bright blue light when excited by electrons, so researchers worked with it to develop blue LEDs. For gallium nitride, both the melting point and vapor pressure of nitrogen are high, making it especially difficult to produce large crystals. One must turn to growth on different substrates to produce single gallium nitride crystals.
1969年、サファイア基板上への単結晶作成の成功と、直後の MIS 型と呼ばれる青色 LED の開発の成功に刺激されて、窒化ガリウムの研究は一時急速に立ち上がりましたが、しかし結晶の品質は一向に向上せず、また P 型結晶の作成ができないために、多くの研究者が窒化ガリウムの研究から撤退していきました。これらの困難にもかかわらず、私は窒化ガリウムはセレン化亜鉛に比べて結晶が物理的にも科学的にも極めて安定であって、熱伝導率なども大きいことでなので、何とかしてこの窒化ガリウムの高品質の単結晶を作成して、信頼性の高い PN 接合型の LED を実現しようと決心しました。1973年です。
In 1969, single crystalline films were grown on sapphire substrate, and gallium nitride blue LEDs were conceived shortly thereafter. Stimulated by this success, research on gallium nitride blue LEDs saw a brief surge. But the quality of gallium nitride remained poor, and neither the P-type crystal nor the PN junction could be made. Researchers withdrew from the field. Despite these difficulties, gallium nitride remained promising in that the crystals were stable and had a high thermal conductivity. So our goal was to produce high-quality gallium nitride crystals to create LEDs that were reliable. In 1973, I set my mind on this goal.
1974年、分子線エピタキシーと呼ばれる方法では初めて不均質ながら窒化ガリウム単結晶の作成に私成功しましたが、当時の装置では良質の窒化ガリウムの作成は困難でした。そこでハイドライド基層成長法といわれる別な方法で成長を続け、78年、従来に比べて格段に明るい青色 LED を開発しまして、国際会議に発表したんですが、全く反響はありませんでした。私はその時、我一人荒れ野を行くと感じましたが、たとえ一人になっても窒化ガリウムの研究をやめようとは思いませんでした。
Next slide, please. By that date, the molecular beam epitaxy method had been developed to grow other thin film crystals, but had not been tested on gallium nitride. I grew gallium nitride crystals for the first time in 1974. They were rather inhomogeneous. The equipment and method were still in their early phases, and it was difficult to grow high-quality films with them. Not one to give up easily, I continued, and in 1978, succeeded in fabricating a blue LED by HVPE, that's hydride vapor phase epitaxy, that was far brighter than anything seen before, though no comparison to what came later. We presented the results at an international meeting where it had no impact. Gallium nitride researchers had left the field. I felt like a solitary soul traveling in the wilderness, yet had no intention of quitting my gallium nitride research.
その頃、少年時代に鉱石を見たり、60年代に名古屋大学でゲルマニウム単結晶の観察を楽しんだように、窒化ガリウムの底に写っている写真の結晶を蛍光顕微鏡で見るのが日課でした。ある日、あのようにクラックやピットのたくさんあるウェーハンの中に、ごく稀にきれいな単結晶があることに気づきまして、一瞬瞳を凝らして、青色 LED としての窒化ガリウムの大きな可能性を実感しました。
In those days, I would use a fluorescent microscope to look at gallium nitride crystals, just as I had spent my childhood enjoying the crystals of mineral ores in the 1960s and examining the morphology of germanium films. One day, may we have the slide back up, the slide that was there a minute ago? Yes. One day, I noticed there were a few clean microcrystals embedded in a wafer with many cracks and pits. I realized that such clean crystals could be the basis for gallium nitride blue LEDs.
この体験から何とかしてウェーハー全体をこのきれいな微結晶と同等の品質に作ることができれば、その時多分表面はクリーン、非常にきれいな鏡面になるだろうと想像したんですが、伝導性の制御も P 型結晶もできるだろう、そういう具合に直感しました。そのキーである結晶成長の原点に立ち返ることにしました。これは私の窒化ガリウム研究だけではなくて、世界中の窒化ガリウム研究開発にとって最も大きな転機だったと思っております。
I told my colleagues that if we could make crystals of extremely high quality, we should be able to realize P-type conductivity. I had no firm grounds for such a statement, but thought if we could make an entire crystal of the quality of those few clean microcrystals, which I imagined would have a mirrored surface, we should be able to gain control of electrical conductivity. The key was crystal growth, to which I turned my attention. This was a turning point, not only in my own research, but in gallium nitride research and development throughout the world.
結晶の品質はその成長法と成長条件に大きく依存します。有機金属化合物を用いる基礎成長法は1971年窒化ガリウムに初めて試みられましたが、良い結果が得られずそのまま放置されていました。私はこれは逆方向反応がなくて成長速度も非常に適しているので、サファイア状へのガリウムナイトライドの結 成長には最適であると判断しまして、これを復活させることにしました。1979年です。この選択が間違いでなかったことは、今日、窒化ガリウム系の結晶や素子がほとんどこの有機金属化合物を使った結晶成長法で作成されていることからも明らかであります。
Crystal quality is affected by the methods and conditions of their growth. The MOVPE, that's metal organic vapor phase epitaxy method, had been used to grow gallium nitride, but the results were poor and the method abandoned. I decided to resurrect it. MOVPE does not involve reverse reactions, has an appropriate growth rate, and an ease of impurity doping. It should thus be the most appropriate method for growing gallium nitride on substrates such as sapphire. Thus, I decided to adopt MOVPE as the method for growing gallium nitride. That my choice was not wrong is apparent from the fact that most gallium nitride-based crystals produced today use MOVPE.
この後、古巣である名古屋大学に戻って、大学院生らとこの有機金属化合物を使った基礎成長法によって、窒化ガリウムの結晶成長に取り組みましたが、初めはなかなかきれいな結晶はできませんでした。試行錯誤を何年も繰り返し、反応感と成長条件に革新と改善を行い、ついに1986年に低温バッファー層技術というものを開発いたしました。私が1979年以来、その実現を夢見てきた素晴らしい外観と内容を伴った全くの鏡面の窒化ガリウム結晶を見た時の感動は忘れることはできません。
May we have the next slide, please? I then returned to Nagoya University and started working on gallium nitride growth with a team of graduate students. Even using MOVPE, however, it was not easy to develop homogeneous gallium nitride crystals, and we continued to make improvements in the reactor tube and growth conditions until we created the optimal growth process. And you can see here on an aluminum nitrate substrate the deposition of the gallium nitride crystals over a period of 5, 10, 20, and 60. I can't quite read the left side, but I think that's what it says, until you have the fully developed clear crystal with the mirror-like surface that Dr. Akasaki had been seeking to achieve. The thrill I felt when I finally saw gallium nitride crystals in an ideal form is unforgettable. It was something I had dreamt of since 1973.
直ちに P 型伝導の実現に向けて、この高品質の窒化ガリウムへの亜鉛のドーピングを試みましたが、P 型結晶は得られませんでした。ある日、電気陰性度のデータからマグネシウムの方がジンクよりも活性化しやすいのではないかということにある時ひょっと気がついたんですが、そしてそこでその高品質の窒化ガリウムへマグネシウムドーピングを試みました。そしてそれに電子線で冷気することによってマグネシウムの関与する発酵の著しい増大とともに、その試料が非常に抵抗の低い P 型伝導が実現していることを発見いたしました。直ちに LED を手作りしまして、それで見たことないような見事な電流電圧特性を得まして、PN 接合の実現を確認しました。
We immediately tried to create a P-type junction. We doped the gallium nitride crystals with zinc, but this failed. Other data suggested that magnesium might be more suitable, so we doped the gallium nitride crystals with magnesium and found the brightness markedly enhanced and that the samples had been converted to the P-type junction.
Would you please next slide? Next slide? Next slide?
We will have that, excuse me. Yes, we do need the next slide, please. We then fabricated PN junction LEDs by hand, demonstrated better characteristics that had been seen with existing LEDs, and confirmed that PN junctions had been made. どうぞ。
そして初の窒化ガリウム PN 接合 LED からの目にしみるような青色発光を見て感動を新たにしました。
Oh, we need the slide, please. The sight of the piercing blue light from the first gallium nitride-based LEDs amazed me all over again.
1990年には窒化ガリウムからの誘導放出、これはレーザーですが、それ室温で初めて、しかも今までよりは1桁以上小さい入力で、これを実現しまして、レーザーダイオードの可能性を示しました。これらの成果が引き金になりまして、世界中での窒化ガリウムの研究が急速に進んで、今日ではその論文数も急増しております。
In 1990, we used crystals to achieve stimulated emission, that is, laser light, from gallium nitride with an order of magnitude less energy than before. This offered the prospect of making blue laser diodes. Research on gallium nitride crystals accelerated, and with it came a great increase in publications.
1992年から名城大学で結晶のさらなる高品質化の研究を続け、1996年には376、これは市外のレーザーダイオードの発信に成功し、2004年には当時世界最短波長の350ナノメートルのレーザーダイオードを実現しております。ごく最近はもっと、波長の短い市外ダイオードの研究に必要な窒化アルミニウム、ガリウムの研究に勤しんでおります。
I moved to Meizhou University in 1992 and continued my research into high-quality crystals. We made lasers of 376 and then 351 nanometers, the shortest wavelengths in the world at that time. More recently, we have been developing aluminum gallium nitride crystals, which can be ultraviolet LEDs.
はじめに光ありきという言葉が示すように、光は私どもの生活にとって深く関わっています。人類や多くの生物にとって光はかけがえのない存在であり、古来人類は火の創出に始まり、電灯、蛍光灯に続き、今世紀、20世紀に入って後半に入って LED などの半導体発光体を実現してまいりました。青色 LED の実現により、半導体による光の三原色が揃い、全固体素子によるフルカラーディスプレイや白色 LED の開発され、また青色 LED レーザーは高超高密の、超高精度の高密度の情報処理に活用されております。さらに一般照明のほか、医療あるいは農業などこういう分野への応用が広がっていくでしょう。
They say, in the beginning, there was light, for light is closely tied to our lives. It is critical for humans and other creatures, and we have pursued light sources since ancient times, starting with flame, then incandescent light, fluorescent lamps, and then LEDs. The development of blue LEDs completed the set of light's three primary colors based on semiconductors. This permitted the development of full-color displays and white LEDs, while blue lasers are now used for ultra-high-density information processing and other applications. Beyond general lighting, their applications may expand into areas such as medical and agricultural lighting. May we have the last slide, please?
終わりに、私は大変な奥手で、40代の初めに青色発光の魅力に取りつかれ、その実現を目指して、ただ愚直に仕事をしてまいりました。ごく平凡な研究者である私が本日このような記念講演をさせていただきますことは誠に身に余る光栄であり、多くの方々の多大なご協力とご支援の賜物であります。
To conclude my remarks today, I would like to add that I am very much a late starter. Ever since I fell under the spell of blue LEDs in my early 40s, I have simply performed my work honestly in an attempt to make useful devices. To a regular researcher like me, it is more honor than I deserve to be able to give this commemorative lecture today, and only the result of the tremendous help and support of a number of people.
今日まで私を導き、支えてくださいましたすべての方々に心から感謝申し上げます。ありがとうございました。
I express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who have mentored and supported me today. Oh, the slide's gone, but there they were. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very nicely done. To give you a sense of the practical applications of Dr. Akasaki's research, we are pleased to have with us today Mr. Klaus Hofrichter, Vice President for Software Development at Sony Corporation. Klaus joined Sony 11 years ago, working in the network services for consumer electronics. He moved to Sony Computer Entertainment in 2004, supporting the PlayStation network development and PlayStation launch. He moved to Sony Electronics in San Diego in 2006, working in the United States and worldwide TV product development. Please welcome Klaus Hoftrichter.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor today to be here, and thank you, Dr. Akasaki, for your dramatic story today. I would like to explain the application of the blue LED in consumer electronics specifically. And so if we go to the next slide, please. Sony Electronics is actually headquartered here in the US in San Diego. So in Rancho Bernardo, we have a new building, which is pretty high. You can see it from the highway. Myself, I'm with Sony for 11 years. I'm just joined a few years ago here in San Diego, and I'm very happy to be here. Our relation to the Kyoto Prize is, of course, very deep. As an industry leader in consumer electronics, of course, I would like to thank Dr. Akasaki for this specific achievement, and I'm sure that everyone else in the consumer electronics space joins with that. Also, on a personal level, I remember when I had my first car back in Germany. I come from Germany, which had the blue LED instead of kind of a blue other light, and it had a very distinct, valuable feeling. So thank you for that. I still remember that. If we go to the next slide, the history of LED, I think. The history of the LED was already explained. I think the red LED started in 1962, invented here by Dr. Holonaik in GE. Then Akasaki-san was working, as we heard, in Nakaya University on the blue LED. Further development was done by Nakamura-san on higher brightness. And eventually, we heard about that, the blue laser semiconductor was brought to the market. Let us move forward to next slide. The first product that Sony actually, where Sony introduced the blue LED for a TV was the so-called Qualia 005. Qualia was a series of consumer electronics that had a higher quality standard. Price did not matter much here. So it was really about quality. In 2004, this was introduced, and it used the LED backlight. And this could also only be made possible with the blue LED, which you see here in this chart. Moving forward to the next slide, what is LED TV? So you hear a lot today maybe about LED TV, but in reality, LED TV is still an LCD TV. LCD is the technology that creates the picture actually on the screen, and LED, or the alternative prior technology for flat panel TV, CCFL, provides the backlight. There is a number of advantages, of course, for the LED backlight, which I come in the next materials here. So if you move forward to the next slide, the worldwide introduction of this technology, flat panel display, as you can see here, the CRT, the tube TV, kind of goes out of the market in these days. It is too heavy, too difficult to manufacture and transport, and flat panel TV are much more attractive. And initially, as I mentioned before, the CCFL backlight was used, which is a different technology. Now, just recently, LED backlight is introduced, which allows us for a much thinner production. And I come to other advantages of that in the future. And the expectation, as you can see here, for 2013, just 3 years into the future, is basically 50% of the TV production will be based on the work made possible by Akasaki-san. If we go to the next page, basically the revenue share by backlight type kind of shows the same picture here. The LED edge and LED direct technologies will take over for the illumination technology for televisions. Going to the next page, I think it was also introduced by Dr. Scott already. A lot of technology today is using blue LED technology, and we mentioned the TV, PCs, laptops, Blu-ray laser, mobile phones, remote controls, car stereos or car entertainment devices, and there is also a PlayStation 2 in the lower right, which uses a blue LED for a power indicator. I actually have a couple of products here on my right-hand side. We will turn them on later, but these products are based on this technology, and please have a look maybe after this event. If we go to the next page, I would like to introduce 4 different areas where the blue LED actually provides a significant advantage in technology. It allows us to do a better design, specifically a thin design. We can have better picture quality, specifically in the TV area. It is a green technology, so I think it was mentioned before that LED is much more efficient, and so it allows us to reduce power consumption and eventually content production through the Blu-ray technology. We can have a higher definition content, and also it allows us to produce 3D content, which is coming up and very popular in the future, we believe. I would like to go into those 4 areas here. If you go to the next page. Design evolution, thin design. So here's a comparison of a flat panel display. On the left-hand side, you are seeing the CCFL display. What it does is basically the red dots you see here, and let me just maybe point here. These yellow dots, excuse me, are emitting the light, and the LCD on the left-hand side allows or kind of modulates the light so that it would shine through or not. On the right-hand side, you see now an LED technology, and what we use here is we actually place the LEDs on the edge. So you see here, the screen is this larger structure, and here on the edge there is the LED. And it's very thin because in this case, we do not have LEDs all over the panel. It's only on the edge. And there's a substrate in the middle between the rear and the front, which then diffuses the light. And the same LCD technology then can be used to present a picture on the front side. If we go to the next page, here you can see the flexibility in thin design. On the right-hand side, you see here a more recent Sony TV that has a very thin structure, and it looks actually quite beautiful. So I invite you, of course, to take a look. If we go to next page, how about the picture quality? So what you're going to see here is with the LED backlight, going one step further, if we do not use the LED on the edge, but also as on the whole backside, what we can do then is something called local dimming, meaning the light will only show up in areas where actually the picture requires light. In this particular case here, you see in the upper left, for example, there's dark sky. So there is no need basically to produce light, and therefore if we do not turn on these LEDs then there is a higher contrast compared to the areas where we have light. This is only possible with LED because with the former CCLF technology we could not do this type of local dimming. Also the LED has a very high frequency, it can be switched on and off very quickly, and therefore the picture will be also very, very well displayed. If we go to the next picture, I come again to the frequency and the high performance of an LED TV or an LCD TV. Traditionally, we use a 60 hertz television. You can see that on the top here, where basically in this particular case, every 60 times per second you will see a different picture. And here we have 2 of these frames apart 1/60th of a second. Now, with the higher frequency that we can achieve through the LED, we can actually calculate on the television itself an intermediate picture. That is what you see in the middle, where now we can display every 120th of a second, so twice the rate of the picture of the original source material, we can display a frame. And this allows for a much smoother display, so less flickering. And moving forward to the lower level here, we can achieve also 240 hertz. This is the high-end technology today. which allows to create 3 intermediate pictures which are calculated. So this is not out of the source material, it is calculated and it presents a much smoother image. What it also allows is it allows for 3D technology to achieve 3D pictures, because usually 3D TVs that you buy today or that you can buy, they have a 240 hertz panel. And also when you do this, because of this calculation, you can see here LED off is a little marker here. The LED allows us to turn on and off the backlight quick enough so that we have a really high quality between these pictures. If we go to the next page, we show also the wider color space that is achieved by help of the blue LED, of course, together with the other LED colors, so that we have a better color representation, also made possible through the blue LED technology. Let's go to the next picture, Go Green. I think it was mentioned before, LED is very efficient compared to other technologies, so the amount of light given from a certain amount of energy is much higher than before, and therefore we can achieve lower power consumption, and this is of course a very important technology for generations to come. Also here in this particular television that we are presenting here, we have a presence sensor where the TV is actually turned off when there is nobody in the room. So there's other technologies also to use this to reduce the power consumption. Let's go to the next page. Content. I mentioned 3D content, but also, of course, for high-definition TVs, we are using the LED blue LEDs. And here on my side, I think we are turning on now the devices here. Most of the TVs we have today have blue LEDs inside, and also we have other devices that I will introduce in a minute. Going to the next page, 3D technology. So I think I mentioned the blue laser and Blu-ray technology. Blu-ray allows for a much denser information, much more information on a single disc. And for 3D and HD TV, we will need much more data. For 3D, as you have stereoscopic display, you need twice the amount of pictures, of course, one for the left eye, one for the right eye. And so with this particular high density of the Blu-ray laser, because of its smaller wavelength, this is the only way to achieve 3D content on a portable and affordable medium like the Blu-ray. So this technology is made possible through the blue LED. Coming to my last material here, I would like to explain the varieties here of the technologies that we are using in 3D. So we have 3D at the home. So I think Sony and other manufacturers are bringing 3D capable television sets to the market. There will be 3D games. We have here on display actually also a PlayStation 3, which uses also a Blu-ray player. And so this device will be possible to display 3D content also and 3D games through that. We have network services and so on. And here also for the 3D cameras. So there's also cameras coming out using also blue light technology to create home content. So you can create your own 3D content. And finally, of course, 3D content will come to you also through broadcast. I think the recent golf tournament was also displayed in 3D in some areas, and this will be becoming much more prevalent in the future. And so I'd like to summarize here. The blue LED created a lot of opportunities for CE and maybe all of technology here. Specifically a design evolution, as I explained, thin displays, better quick picture quality, we can go green, and we have more content available. So on behalf of everyone, I think I would like to thank Akasaki-san for his groundbreaking work, and I'm looking forward to see what else can be done with the Blu-ray technology. Well, thank you very much.
So that finishes our program, and I thank you very much for coming. Feel free to spend a little time here. We've got some lovely products. The 3D glasses are up here if you want to see the first generation of 3D television. And the items were shipped down from Sony a couple of days ago, and I'm sure they'd be happy to have them explored for the next hour or so if you'd like to stay around. Thank you very much for coming.